Hey guys, Matt from Eastwood. We're here in the Eastwood garage doing a little live tech session for you guys. We're in the middle of filming a how to repair stainless trim video, and we thought we'd show you guys a couple tips of what we're doing today. So if you haven't watched one of these before, we like them to be interactive. We want you guys to ask questions, so you can jump on the chat. Taking over for Scotty C today, we got Randy.
Yeah, Scotty C has to take tech calls today. We just launched our brand new scroll compressor. If you haven't seen it, got to visit Eastwood. If you need an air compressor, make sure you go to Eastwood today and check out our scroll compressor. It's on sale. We got a great deal. But it took off so well, Scotty had to stay at his desk and answer questions. But anyways, we got some trim repair, which is good for me because I'm going to have to do some of this soon on an old car I got. So let's see what we got going here, Matt.
So something that comes up, we've offered trim repair products for a long time. It's been one of our staple products and something that Kurt brought on, the owner of the company, early on in the company's history. It's always done well. It's always been in the catalog, but we don't show it off too often. I figured I'd show you guys some good uses for it. So I have a piece of trim here that we're working on, a spear from a 51 or 52 Chevy. So this is typical of this era, the 50s and the 60s. You'd see a lot of stainless trim, especially in the 50s. And if you're working on a car or you've done a restoration that has a lot of stainless, you know that the repair bill to repair stainless is very expensive. It's actually not a really difficult process. It's just time consuming and it's a little tedious. But if you get a couple of these really inexpensive tools, it's pretty easy to do. The main things we're going to be using, we have our two trim hammers here, and we have our trim anvil here. This is kind of the key products that you need to fix most any stainless trim that you're going to be working on. Nice thing with these, the first one here has a little blunt, almost chisel end on it, and has a little flat on the other end. So this is smaller hammers that are used for getting in tight areas. And this will allow you to get in its tight areas in the corners of the trim. And we have this one here that has the larger flat area there, and it has kind of like a ball peen on the other end. So this is good for getting in the trim that may have a rounded, more of a rounded shape to it. And then we have our anvil here.
What style hammer is that?
Repousse hammer, right? We were discussing the correct pronunciation of it. It's French, I believe. So this is our anvil. This can be screwed down into the workbench. You can put it in a vise. Today I'm just going to show you guys. Put it in a vise here. So the big thing is we're not hammering hard like you would on a body panel if you're knocking out a big dent. This is something that, light tapping, not a lot of force. So I'm going to show you on, I've got a couple of them right here. So I'm going to show you on this one right here that's pretty bad. It has a pretty good door ding or fender ding, whatever, on this. It would have happened. So you can see how much of an area has been affected. If you try and take a big body hammer to that, you're going to probably overstretch the metal, or you're going to make the damage worse. So the nice thing with this anvil is it has the sharp edges here. One is flat and one is rounded to get into the trim. It has a nice flat area on the top here. So on this particular one, a little tip, let me flip this over here. So the area we're working, the dent actually gets into where the curved or the folded edges that would hold the trim clips. So you can't get in there normally, real easy with a hammer. So one thing you can do is take just a flathead screwdriver, or if you have a little chisel, you can do the same thing. But turn this so you guys can see here a little easier. So you can just take your screwdriver and just work lightly to just fold that edge up just a little bit so we can get our hammer in there, and then we can tap it shut once we're done the job. But you need to get in there to work that to get the area out. With the stainless trim, this isn't like a body panel where you may be able to use primer or filler to hide the damage. So I got that opened up just a little bit in there. And we'll take this hammer here. And I use the chisel end quite often because you can go along a dent. I'm tapping lightly. And once you start hearing the ringing where we're hitting metal on metal, we know that we're pretty much flat. So that ringing there is what we're listening for. So we'll check real quick. And already we got the dent coming out. So I'm working in the center of that dent, and we're going to try and reverse it. So I'm trying to get the majority of that damage out right in the center where it was really deep, and we can kind of work around as we go. So you can still kind of see it. If you see that shadow, that there's a dent there, it's going to really show up once you start polishing the metal. So get in here. So we're just listening for that ringing, and I'm tapping very lightly here. Now we can get in. Try not to hit Joe the camera guy here. And like I said, we bent that edge up so we could kind of get in, and we can see that this is starting to come out pretty good. So one thing you can do, depending on the damage, you can take a fine file here, and we can work all that out. So we can file on it to see where we're at. So just slightly, we're not really trying to take a ton of material off, just trying to highlight any damage that might need to be taken care of a little further. So that's going to highlight, you can see where our main point of impact is there. I noticed a lot of tight camera work. So got a little tiny spot there that's still showing up. So I'm going to hit that just a little bit more with the hammer here. And you can flip it over. All right, so we got that one pretty close, so I'm going to work on this one here. Any questions before I
we have a lot of people today saying this is a great skill to learn because of the cost of fixing it or just trying to buy new. One question we have here on Facebook, you were hammering from the inside out. Is that how it's always done, or is that just based on how the dents are?
Oh, good question. So depending on the dent, most of the time when you're working on trim, your trim's going to be dented in because most of the time it's from door dings or somebody swung the door into it or something ran into it, so it's going to push it in. But what sometimes happens, and I'll see if we have one on this other piece, sometimes you will get dents or pushes that will come out, which a lot of times are actually from damage related somewhere else. So if there was a hit that was really hard here, it may have pushed the trim in so far that you get a high spot next to it. So you may need to hammer the other way. But generally with trim, you're usually turning it upside down and hammering on it to try and get the dents worked out. You can go just a little past flush, so it's a little high. A lot of times there's damage where there's actually like a gouge in the metal, so you need to actually raise it up a little bit higher so that you can sand or file it to get it perfectly smooth. So that's what I was doing with the one over here. I hammered up the main part of the damage just a little further so that when I file it, it takes just a tiny bit off. So that's a good question for sure. Any other ones? All right. All right, so I'm going to quick work on this one. I'll work a little faster, and then we'll kind of show you how we can transform.
Which one?
Yeah, right here. We'll get in close. So this one you will notice is right on this character line or the point, the peak in this trim. So that's a little more difficult because that is definitely an area that we can't sand on too much because you may round the edge and change the shape of the trim there. All right. So we're going to flip this over, and what I'm going to do is work right next to that first. So So I'm staying away from that peaked edge first. And I want to get all the damage around it worked out first, so that you basically get like 1 or 2 good shots to fix that character line. So you can see I've already reduced that dent there. Much smaller already. So right now I've just worked it out to basically where it's just right over top of that peak there. So now what I can do is I'm going to take this chisel end. This is where it's really good for this. We're going to take our chiseled end and we're going to go right on that character line or the peak. And make sure that your aim's pretty good. I'm going to hammer right in that peak till we start hearing it ring. So you can see the key thing I want to show you guys is you're not hammering hard when you're doing this. You really have to, you know, have a little more finesse when you're doing that. So I got the majority of it out. Probably needs a tiny bit more tapping right there. All right, that's coming out pretty good there. I think if I'm mainly just lightly using the file to kind of highlight any issues that may show up. I'm not trying to take a ton of material off. So I can see already on this one, there's a spot right here that's showing up when I'm hitting it with the, right there. So right there. There's an area where the file isn't hitting. So instead of trying to sand, you know, this trim's pretty thin. You don't want to try and just sand all that off. So what we're going to do is try and just hammer a little more. All right. Hit it lightly with our file. And that area is disappearing. So you want to use a fine file here. You don't want to use a real heavy cut file. You can use a flatter or round, whichever you prefer. I like using the round so I can kind of work in more areas on it. And I don't need as many files out or tools out when doing that. So that's one. Got our other one here. I'm going to tap just a little bit more on that and see. Oh man, we got a caller.
I don't even have to take questions if you're going to get them directly.
Yeah. Probably is somebody asking a question. Video foul. All right. So we are just about there on this section. So I usually leave bending these edges till last because we may need to go back in as we start sanding it. You may find you have to go back in, but there's just a little spot there. So what we can do, you can use, don't be afraid to use a punch or a chisel if you are very, very careful. It's not something you want to hit too hard because, again, you can actually punch a hole in the trim if you hit too hard. So there was a little spot where the actual brunt of the damage was that was kind of scarred the metal or put a scratch in it. So I'm trying to knock it out just a little high so that I can file it smooth first. So the more work you do by hand like this ahead of time will save you a lot of sanding and polishing in the end because you're just doing the same thing when you're polishing or sanding. Doing the same thing. All right, that one is disappearing. So we'll take this over. Now, actually, I'll show you real quick. We're not going to hammer out dents with this one too much, but I want to show you guys. this hammer here, like we mentioned earlier, this one has a larger flat head on it, which is really nice for trim like this. This is off a, memory is correct, a 56 Chevy. But it has a big flat area here that you're going to have to work out. And dents, as you can see, a lot of waves and dents will come into these over time. So this is great for having a nice big flat area that you can get in. And you can work in one pass through, and you're kind of covering the majority of the flat area. And you're always keeping the trim tight on the anvil as you work. All right, so that's why this hammer is really good. Again, the rounded end is good if you're working on something that has a real tight curve in it. You can use that to work out a dent. So, the piece that we were working on here, we have a bunch of the edges that are, we were scratched up from the file. So what I usually do is I start with like a 120 or a 220 if you have file marks. If you do not have file marks, you can usually jump ahead. But I'll take the DA sander and we will turn the speed down a little bit. Again, I'm not pressing real hard with the DA sander. I'm just letting it do its work and spin over top of it. And this is an area right here that you could see that was pretty bad in the beginning there. I've already pretty much got it all. You don't see any dark spots too much where it is low. So we're pretty good there. I'm going to hit just real quick a little more, and then I'll hit these two spots, and then we'll move forward. All right, so we got all these spots. This is the one with the edge that we were working on that was right in the crown of the trim. You could probably hear in the sander, I'm letting off when I get on that crown. When you're sanding on an edge, it's really easy to take a bunch of material off. So I let off the pressure of the sander almost completely, and I just kiss that top edge to get rid of any inconsistencies in the panel or in the trim there. And so that was 120. I'm going to jump up to 320 now with the panels. Oh my goodness. That fitting was borrowed at some point. All right. That's kind of the scary part of doing trim, is starting to sand on your potentially expensive trim. But I do promise that it is it's a necessary evil to get that. So that is after 320. You can see actually it's highlighting. There's a little dent I missed right there. that we'll go back to in a second. And I'll tap that out. And then we'll just move up a couple grits, and then we'll show you kind of the quick finishing of it. But this is what happens as you're sanding. You will highlight different areas that you may have missed. Any questions?
Yeah, we have one question that I'm going to ask you since you do a lot of TIG welding.
Okay.
Bob wants to know, he says, I have some pot metal trim that he needs attached mounting studs to.
Ooh. Pot
He
metal.
also has our AC/DC TIG welder.
Okay.
Do you think that is going to be possible, or could it be brazed?
It is possible, but it's very difficult. Did you say, does it need to be brazed? Was that the last part?
That was the other thing, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was going to get to. What I would do is braze with the TIG with that. And depending on the type of pot metal or how poor of quality it is, when you try and hit that with an arc, it may fall apart instantly. But if it's half decent, what you can do is you can use silicon bronze filler rod with your TIG welder, and you can basically braze with a TIG at low amperage, and you're kind of just melting it onto the piece. Same kind of process as you would do with brazing with a torch. I would definitely suggest being very comfortable with TIG welding before you attempt that, because you can cause a lot more damage than good with it. But it's definitely possible. I've done it before, brazing with silicon bronze. It just takes a little bit of practice. If you can practice on an area that's inconspicuous, that's what I would suggest, so you can kind of see how the metal reacts, because your settings are going to change on what type of trash metal that was used to create that piece. But yeah, it's a good question. All right, so got that little spot out. So I'm going to jump up real quick through grits here. Have a little bit of sanding, and we're going to move over to the buff motor. If you have any questions, definitely shoot them over.
We actually got a good tip
Oh.
here on YouTube. They said, James says, to make sure you use those cushioned DA back pads like that,
Okay.
rather than a hard one.
Oh,
because
yeah.
that way you don't, you're not going to sand into the trim as much. 'Cause
Yeah.
The cushion of the pad gives you a little.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know, you guys come up with a word. I'm thinking.
The word. Yeah, we do actually offer a intermediate pad that goes on your DA that'll go, like this already has, as mentioned, has a soft backer on it, so it can flex some. But we also offer a really soft, it's maybe like 2 inches thick, an intermediate that has the hook and loop on it, so you can put that on and then put your sandpaper on top of that. That's if you're doing something that has a lot of shape to it, where you're afraid you're going to cut in even with this. You can put that on and it'll help as well. But that's a good tip. Most of our DAs have a softer backing pad on them, so they do flex. But yeah, you definitely don't want to use one that has a hard backer on it, because you will eat through this trim really quick, especially if you're using heavier grits. Good tip. All right, so that was 600. And I'm speeding up the process here a little bit, just so, since we're live. You want to kind of check each time. You may have to hammer up. Now I'm pushing down on the trim on this. It's flat here, so I make sure I don't catch an edge on it. 800. Jump up to, I'm going to skip up to 1200 here because this is actually getting pretty smooth. So I'm going to skip up a little bit. And then from here we're going to jump over to the buff motor. We have it all the way up to 1500 if you want to go that far. The buffer, if you're changing your compounds, you can kind of get the same process with that anyways if you want to go that. But you can go that far with the DA if you want to. We offer the sandpaper. All right, so that was 1200. I'll get over here so you guys can see. Oop. So you can see pretty much this is where we had that one right in here that was pretty bad, that was in that. I could still just barely see a little low spot there. I might tap that real quick with the hammer before we go to the buffer. And it's just, that's the process. You're just chasing the white lines on it. All right, so we're going to hop over to the buffer. We'll hit this real quick and then show you just a little section. So this is our 1-horse buff motor we're using over here. And this has 2 speeds to it, which is nice. We can run it on the lower speed for the trim. I'm going to use, we have some of our emery here, so for harder types of metal. So this is stainless, of course, and you can tear this away and use that to load up your wheel. So I'm going to put just a little bit on here. All right. I'm using the bottom half of the wheel, or bottom, 3/4, quarter rather, not 3/4. This is the scary part if you're worked on your trim for hours. So I'm using light pressure. I'm letting the compound and the wheel do the work. I'm not pushing real hard into it. If you're doing bumpers or something, you may push a little harder. But on this thin stainless trim here, we'll work that top edge there. So you want to be buffing off of the workpiece. So the wheel's turning down and it's going off of the edge here. We don't want to have it turned like this where it's catching the edge. That's where I might have a problem. So I want to have it turned so it's going off the workpiece. And again, not pushing real hard. Don't want to put a ton of heat into the trim either, so we turn it into a pretzel. Because the heat, you can warp the trim by doing that. There's ways to get it back out, but we want to try and minimize the heat in this to avoid having any issues here. So I could see a couple little spots here we need to go back and work, but I'm going to buff this section up to show you guys what it looks like. And you can do this process back and forth, no problem. Let's see, where'd we go? All the way to there. All right. All right, so aside from my fingerprints, it's getting shiny. I can still see there's a couple little spots that need, you see kind of a mirror effect. It either needs a little more, you might be able to cut it with the buff wheel a little bit to get some of that out. If you sit there long enough, you can work it and get some of those little bit of wavy spots out, or you can go back with the hammer and tap real lightly. But I'm just showing you guys for the live here. Now I'm going to load up the loose wheel with a little bit of white rouge. And this is more of a finishing. You can spend as much time as you want on the buffing part until you're happy with it. If you're doing a driver, what we're doing here might be more than adequate. If you're building a full high-end restoration or custom or whatever, you're going to want to go back and fix any little tiny waves. Or like I said, you could spend a little more time with the emery and work out those areas that are just have a little funhouse mirror effect to them, because those spots are still a little inconsistent. And that's all you're doing when you're buffing. You're basically just like we were doing with the sandpaper. You're just kind of taking tiny bit of material off and smoothing everything out, making the surface perfectly smooth. All right. So that's just a quick, get the lot. Now we still got a couple little dents you can see in there. Just really minor. That's the only downside. The shinier it gets, the more you're going to see every little inconsistency in the piece. And you just got to go back and forth. But that's the basic process. We took this trim that was pretty badly damaged and we got it back. I mean, that's basically like a driver quality. And like I said, we can go back and fine-tune those little spots and get it perfect. It takes time, but that's why it costs so much money if you get it done. So with just a small investment in the tools here, you can do all the trim on your car and you'll have time in it, but the tools will definitely pay for themselves after the first job for sure. Any other questions before we?
That was all the questions
Cool.
for today.
Cool. Well, thanks guys for watching. We're going to finish up the rest of some of these pieces of trim and get a nice shot of them for you guys to see. And if you want to watch the full video of the process, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe and you'll get notified when we put new videos out, and you'll see this one out in a week or 2 weeks. Thanks guys for watching. Catch you later.